not feeling too cold, a low of 11 degrees. Tomorrow, a fine and sunny day for most and a high of 25. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Ros Unwin.
Nice suit.
Oh, thank you.
I love a man in a suit.
Okay.
Smells expensive.
Oh, look, Mike, stop. Thanks for the compliment. Bye then. Yeah, had a few problems on the train, so thought it'd be easier to join the meeting online. So, what's first on the agenda?
Go to meeting, because online meetings mean nothing gets in the way. Search gotomeeting.co.uk.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC with Ian Dale at Drive. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC.
Hello, a very good afternoon to you. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 4 here on LBC. In a moment, we'll be with Alex Salmond, who'll be taking your calls. Are already flooding in 0345 6060 973. You can ask about the EU referendum or, frankly, anything else. But at 5, I want to talk about Tony Blair and Jeremy Corbyn, because Mr Blair has launched a blistering attack on the Labour leader, accusing him of focusing on what he calls the politics of protest at the expense of the politics of power. Isn't it time Labour started listening to the man who won them 3 elections? That's coming up after 5. Alex Salmond just said no. Well, we know, Alex, that you think he should be in The Hague, so we're going to take no as read.
The Hague, the Old Bailey, the Court of Session in Edinburgh, any court will do.
Now, you can, of course, watch us not only on the LBC website, but also on the LBC Facebook page. A lot of people are doing that. You can actually comment as we go along, reading through the comments from the Israeli ambassador interview last week. Well, should we say quite an education? Right, Alex, before we go to the calls, I've got to ask you about this breaking news that the government has announced that they're going to extend voter registration for the referendum until Thursday at midnight because their servers crashed last night. That's obviously going to be quite a controversial decision to make. Do you approve of it?
I approve of the decision. I agree it's controversial. In my view, the controversy should actually be not so much about the broken website, which is bad enough. The controversy should be about why there are up to 7 million people who weren't on the electoral roll in the first place. Now, some of that, of course, has got to do with the move in the last year or so to individual registration and the ending over a longer period of the electoral canvass that used to take place on an annual basis. And my view is that the Tory government were quite happy with that because most of the people that dropped off, some estimates say up to a quarter of young people between the ages of 18 and 24, weren't going to vote for them anyway. But, of course, it's exactly that segment of the population who are the most pro-Europe, who are most likely to vote Remain. Hence, in my view, the incredible anxiety and the rush, quite rightly in my view, to allow these people who have been disenfranchised the opportunity to get through the crash website and have tomorrow at midnight to actually get themselves signed up. So, I approve of what's happening. I condemn the double standards, the gerrymandering and the hypocrisy that lies behind it.
Well, Morva in Bury St Edmunds is calling in, I think, on this subject. Morva, good afternoon. What would you like to ask Alex?
Good afternoon, Ian. May I call you Alex?
Yes, of course, Morva. On you go.
OK. Alex, I've already voted. I'm a postal voter. And I took the time and trouble to make sure that I did have a registered vote in time, and I voted on the 31st of May. Now, I fully understand that due to the CRAP elements on this particular campaign, which have disenfranchised people from actually thinking about it, never mind voting, that people have probably realised very late in the day that they need to register for a vote. But really, at what point do you keep this open for? You know, supposing the system crashes today, you've opened it again. Do you keep it open till tomorrow, the day after, a week next Tuesday? When do you stop? It seems to me that if I go for a plane, and the roads down here to Stansted or Heathrow Road or Gatwick are very busy. If I don't leave myself enough time, I'm going to get there. Maybe the plane's gone or the gate's closed. Surely people have to understand that there is a time cut-off.
Yeah, I understand that the cut-off is now going to be midnight tomorrow. And therefore, for people who didn't get through the crashed red site, more of it's www.gov.uk/register to vote. And that you've got your chance until midnight tomorrow if you couldn't get through the crashed website or want to register.
But
the
I think
the points you make are very good ones indeed. Why I'm sympathetic in this case is A, because of the crashed register. The crash website, rather, which is, just an act of monumental incompetence. I mean, can I just point out, moreover, that 2 years ago we had a referendum in Scotland where we had 98% registration. That's greater, much greater than the registration here. And we didn't have a crashed website, and everybody got the vote in time. So, it's possible to do that. The Minister today said to me that's because Scotland is a small place. Whether you're running an election in a country of 5 million people or 50 million people, it's a good idea to have a website that can cope. So I'm sympathetic in that point of view, but it's the underlying democratic point I want to drive at. How can we tolerate a situation where 7 million, according to the Electoral Commission, that's the official body,
fair
people
enough,
were excluded from the electoral roll?
That's kind of a separate point, and maybe we can come back to that
We should
another
reduce
time.
the 7 million as much as possible.
Pardon?
We should reduce that figure as much as possible.
Fair enough. But there's going to be a lot of suspicions that this is yet another establishment stitch-up, because, as you say, if it is predominantly young people who are going to be registering now after the deadline, that's going to benefit the Remain side. Now, it'll be interesting to see after 4:30 when we talk to somebody from the Leave side what their reaction is. I think they ought not to go over to the top on
Let's
this.
differentiate the establishment, which is a wider term, from the Tory government. My view is that the Tory government weren't fussed when lots of young people dropped off the electoral register because they weren't going to vote for them. Now these same young people are most likely to vote for Remain. We have emergency statements and extensions of the deadline. But listen, I don't think it was an establishment plot to break their own website. I think that...
No, it was establishment incompetence.
That was establishment
you don't
cock-up.
have to be a rocket scientist to work out that as the deadline approaches, you need extra server capacity.
Well, perhaps they were surprised by the success of the registration campaign.
But in a sense, though, isn't it sort of up to us as individuals to make sure that we're registered? It's all very well saying that the government sort of doesn't want people to register, but if I move house, I make sure that I register my new address with the electricity company, with the gas company, and voter registration. Why aren't young people able to do that?
Well, the two arguments would be this. One is that young people move much more often. In days gone by, for example, let's say a youngster was going to university, they'd be registered by the head of the household at home and also registered by the university on block in the hall of residence. Now that doesn't happen. And these were fail-safe methods of making sure the youngster was on the register. They only got to vote once, incidentally, in a general election, but nonetheless, there was a fail-safe way of getting people in that category registered. So people move around more often. It's more difficult to register. And listen, Ian, most folk aren't like you and me. Politics is not the first thing in their lives.
No, indeed.
It's not, and therefore it probably comes somewhere behind the gas bill and a range of other things. In terms of doing that, doesn't mean we should allow a situation where millions of our fellow citizens are being disenfranchised. And one of the proudest things, about the Scottish referendum is whatever was said for yes or no, for or against, nobody could complain about the participation rates. 98% registration,
but you mentioned the
85%
Scottish.
turnout.
You mentioned the Scottish referendum. We'll never be able to know whether I'm right on this, but I would bet you quite a lot of money that if this had happened in the Scottish referendum and the government servers had crashed before the registration, you wouldn't have had David Cameron extending the deadline for that, because he would have thought that it would benefit you, not him.
Well, luckily, the Scottish referendum was under the control of the Scottish Parliament.
But you agree with me, really, don't
therefore,
you?
we didn't have to, because we didn't crash our own website. But yeah, I suspect the motivation, and I said to the Minister today, he was hoisting his own gerrymandered petard. This is the first time a Tory minister has been extraordinarily anxious to get young people on the electoral register, but that doesn't make it wrong, incidentally. These youngsters should be on the electoral register, and they should have the right to vote in a referendum, which, above all, remember, is going to affect the young people, people who in large number have not been registered.
Let's move on to something else. Morva, thank you very much indeed for calling in. Sharon is in Foy in Cornwall. Hello, Sharon.
Hello there. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Sharon.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, with the recent sex attacks that are happening across Europe, was the Archbishop right to liken it to racism from Nigel Farage's comments?
Well, he accused Nigel Farage of giving legitimisation to racism.
Yeah, I think he was right. Nigel Farage did that for a reason. I mean, you can always differentiate when people are scaremongering. It's a bit like Cameron and World War III. Cameron says, I never said World War III. But nonetheless, of course, Downing Street briefed to allow the newspapers to say it for him. Similarly, Nigel Farage, if you examine Nigel Farage's speech, he doesn't say, look, there's going to be lots of Eastern European rapists in our streets. But what he does is draws the analogy and allows other people to draw the conclusion. So,
first of all, it wasn't a speech; it was an interview, and I've seen what he said. And he said, I can't remember the exact words, but he mentioned the phrase "cultural differences," and there are cultural differences, are there not?
Well, yes, but one of the cultural differences is not, as far as I know, that immigrants are more prone to sexual attacks on people than indigenous people.
Why are the authorities in Belgium, Holland and Germany having sort of evening classes for migrants to learn how to approach Western women?
But because it's certainly the case that the people from different backgrounds will have different cultural mores. But
that's exactly what Nigel Farage was saying.
No, that's not what he said.
It is exactly what he said.
He certainly mentioned Hamburg, and Hamburg is known not as Belgium is, as you've just said, for educational classes.
No, he mentioned Cologne.
For Cologne, I beg your pardon. For different social mores, it's known where there was a series of sexual assaults on women, and he did that for a purpose, Ian. And it would be naive to believe, interview or speech, it wasn't done for that purpose.
But you actually believe that he does that because he's motivated by racist motives?
Oh, I think that the language of Nigel and of UKIP is designed to stir up racial antagonism between peoples. Absolutely.
Sharon, quick comment from you. What do you think? Do you think the Archbishop was right?
No, I don't. I think he's just pulled it out of the hat again, so we've got to shut the debate down. It's happening. There's a problem over in these other European countries, and we've got a right to know about them. And I would say, if it was happening, so it doesn't matter, whatever, there is cultural differences, and I've got every right to be worried.
See, Sharon, I think, speaks for a lot of people, and I think Nigel Farage speaks for a lot of people when he says what he says.
Well, I mean, lots of things are said on behalf of lots of people, and lots of worries among
but you can't
nice
dismiss
people.
What Sharon says, like Gordon Brown did.
I haven't dismissed what Sharon said in the slightest. You asked me not about Sharon, you asked me about Nigel Farage and his motivations, and I gave you an honest answer to that, Ian. People can have fears stirred up deliberately by politicians. I think it's lowest common denominator politics, and I think that's the business that Nigel Farage is in.
And therefore, you have to believe that Nigel Farage himself personally is a racist.
No, I'm not
believe that. Well, I mean, it's logical, isn't it? Surely.
I think Nigel Farage fishes in that pool. Yes.
But, I mean, you have to then accept that the logic of what you're saying indicates that you believe him to personally be a racist.
No, I believe that Nigel Farage engages in politics which is deliberately designed to increase people's fears. I agreed absolutely with the young lady on the programme last night, questioning him on this very issue, when he turned away from the camera and said, I can't deal with this if I'm getting constantly interrupted. But the young lady was making this exact point. She was accusing him of stirring up racial antagonism by the language and the metaphors which he used. I believe he and his party engaged in that politics.
If he's doing that, why is he doing that?
Well, like most politicians do most things, so as they can get votes. But there are certain things in life and in politics which are more important than votes, in my estimation.
OK, let's move on. Sheila is in Tunbridge Wells. Hello, Sheila.
Hello?
Hello, what would you like to ask?
Hello. How responsible do you think Mike Ashley is for what is happening at the Sports Direct? Please.
Oh, totally. I mean, Sheila, did you have a look at his performance in front of the Select Committee yesterday? Did you see it on television? Maybe some of the clips.
I didn't. No.
Well, I suppose you might argue that he surprised the committee by condemning practices in his own company. I think it would be fair to say the committee expected him to come along and defend the company. In fact, in some cases, he came along and did the opposite. He condemned
which was quite clever.
Which was clever, yes. but of course, Sheila didn't ask me the question. She asked me the question of how responsible he was. And the answer is totally responsible, Sheila, because it's all very well to say, look, I've now got a multi-billion-pound company with tens of thousands of employees. I can't be responsible for everything that's happening in it. that the whole ethos of building up that company, the whole ethos of his behaviour as an entrepreneur has been his personality to take charge and build the company in that direction. And, you know, if say something was going wrong, let's say in the army, then the head guy, the general, must take the rap for practices of his subordinates. And I think the way that Mike Ashley runs that company would tell you that he should take responsibility for the practice of the company. So the answer, straight answer to your question, Sheila, he's totally responsible. I think he was clever in front of the committee yesterday, but that doesn't avoid the fact he's responsible.
What's the worst job you've ever done?
Oh, making hamburgers at Creighton Park. And
that's why I got that dicky tummy.
Well, it's not. I walked off the job because of the nature of what we were being asked to serve.
You worked a role.
I know I walked off the job. I wouldn't do it. I demanded to go in the ice cream cart instead. But I ended up getting the sack because I wouldn't serve up dodgy hamburgers. This is years and generations before BSE or anything like that. This was just dodgy hamburgers, and I'm afraid
Alex Salmond, dodgy hamburger salesman.
Yeah,
It's got a ring to it, hasn't it?
Alex Salmond, man of principle, who walked off the job as opposed to selling unsuspecting people in Creighton Park St Andrews. I'm sure, incidentally, I should say that I'm sure the hamburgers now in Creighton Park St Andrews are wonderful. This was a long time ago.
Don't forget, you can watch us on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk and, of course, on the LBC Facebook page. Meg is in Ladbroke Grove. Hello, Meg.
Hello.
Hello, what's your question?
Yes, Alex, I know you support Hillary Clinton, but like Brexit in the UK, the free trade agreements like TPP and TTIP are perhaps the most important issues facing Americans today. For that reason, now that Bernie is out, I'm unfortunately going to have to vote for Trump because of Hillary's strong support of them. Do you think that too much emphasis is focused on the charisma and personality of the candidates rather than the serious issues?
Well, it's two different questions. I mean, I thought your point about Hillary Clinton's a very interesting one. And Bernie, of course, doesn't regard himself as out. I watched him this morning, and the only thing he didn't say he was out. He said he could count, but he was not counting himself out. But nonetheless, you're right, Meg, that you must expect that now she's got a majority of delegates, that Hillary Clinton will be the Democratic Party nominee. Yeah. Now, the other 2 points you're making about TTIP, well, I'm very concerned about TTIP, but I think the way to deal with TTIP, the thing I'm concerned about is litigation around public services by the setting up of the court. And therefore, I was pleased that the current political situation motivated the Prime Minister into accepting the amendment on the Queen's speech, which should consolidate the protections we have in that, and the knowledge, of course, that other countries are worried about the same thing. So, I think this can be done. Without having Donald Trump as President of the United States of America. And all I'd say to you is have a think about some of the other things that Donald Trump, if we ignore, for example, the wall and his treatment of Mexicans and Muslims and all the rest of it, he has also on occasion suggested he's going to introduce 40% tariffs. Now, you wouldn't have to be the biggest believer in free trade to think that 40% tariff walls between countries which have formerly had a form of free trade would be a backward step and result in a beggar-by-neighbour policy that impoverished everybody.
How important a milestone is this for womankind in general, that a woman is now going to be sort of within spitting distance of the Oval Office? She's got the Democratic nomination. I don't think anybody really doubts that now. That's a big milestone, isn't it?
I think it is, and by coincidence, I'm going to a photo call in the chamber of the House of Commons, which is very unusual. I mean, you usually only get photo calls in the chamber at the start of a parliament, but at 7:30 tonight, there's a photo call for the 150th anniversary of the campaign for women's suffrage, and it's a good indication of how far we've come from that situation now to having a nominee and still favourite to win the presidency as a woman. And, so it's a significant milestone. And despite my criticisms of Hillary Clinton in a number of areas, I still think, A, she's vastly preferable to Donald Trump, and secondly, it is a significant achievement and milestone for women.
But if she loses, there could be, it could be almost a setback, couldn't it? Because there'll be lots of people who say, see, we're not ready for a female president. If Margaret Thatcher, I mean, we haven't had a woman prime minister since Margaret Thatcher, but if she had lost...
But we've had a woman first minister of Scotland.
We have indeed, and indeed in Northern Ireland. If she had if she does lose, I suspect that there will be a lot of people who say, well, that's it for another 20 years.
Yeah, I have to say, even in the areas of what's called redneck America, I doubt if the reasons that they might not vote for Hillary Clinton are the fact she's a woman. I don't think there's any evidence that her femininity, that her gender has been a part. Except for one thing I would say to this. I've been trying to work out why Hillary Clinton has attracted so much criticism. And one reason and one explanation, I think, is just she's been in politics a long time, and you're going to have to acquire baggage along the way. But it's difficult not to resist the feeling that at some point, the idea that she was obviously a very, very smart, intelligent, in some ways far more political person than her husband. Some of the criticism attached to her, for example, long before she was set to estate, when she was First Lady of America, there was the usual stuff about, it's Hillary running the government, it's Hillary trying to get the health thing in. And there was certainly an element of sexism behind these charges. So, listen, I hope she wins, A, because she's a woman, B, because she's a very experienced candidate, and thirdly, because she's not Donald Trump.
Well, we take that as read. You've made your feelings on him very clear over the past months. But, of course, when Nicola Sturgeon became First Minister of Scotland, I don't remember it even being a matter of sort of debate, the fact that she was a woman. Everybody respected her as a politician. I mean, maybe the Scottish press was different, but I certainly never saw anything of it down here. Presumably, she will welcome Hillary Clinton. I imagine they're kindred spirits in many ways.
I haven't followed Nicola's tweets today, but listen, I would drink this fine plastic cup of Chianti several times over that LBC have served up.
We know how to treat you.
If it wasn't, if Nicola hasn't tweeted already her congratulations to Hillary Clinton, I think that's a banker bet.
If you would like to ask Alex a question, he's here for another 5 minutes or so. 0345 6060 973. If you'd like to watch us, we're on the LBC website right now at, did I just say the address? I think I did. lbc.co.uk anyway. And also the LBC Facebook page. If you haven't gone to our Facebook page, it's a really brilliant thing to watch live on the Facebook page. You can comment as you go along as well. Meg, thank you for that. Barbara is in Bexley Heath. Hello, Barbara.
Hello there, hi.
Hi.
My question to Alex actually was, I've noticed today that Tony Blair has asserted once again that he's not a war criminal and attacked Jeremy Corbyn, accusing him of standing by regarding Syria. I was really wondering whether or not Alex thought that this might be a desperate attempt to deflect attention away from the upcoming Chilcot inquiry report.
Let's just hear a little clip from that interview that he's done with Bloomberg Television.
I'm accused of being a war criminal for removing Saddam Hussein, who, by the way, was a war criminal. And yet, Jeremy's seen as a progressive icon as we stand by and watch the people of Syria barrel bombed, beaten and starved into submission and do nothing. Leave aside all of that. The issue is, for me, is what is the best way that you take the traditional values of the left and apply them to the modern world? And it's always been that.
Why do you think it is, as Barbara says, that he's decided to come out? Because this isn't the first interview he's given over the past couple of weeks. Is it to try and get his ammunition in first before Chilcot comes out?
Yeah, Barbara's quite right. In answer to Barbara's question, yes. Blair has already seen the substantive criticism of him in Chilcot. By many accounts, that is going to be damning. And his tactic will be to reassemble as much of his old guard as he possibly can, and fight the matter and try and deflect it into as many issues as he possibly can. And of course, you noticed a classic Blairism in that interview. People are not saying he's a war criminal because he removed Saddam Hussein. That's not why he's a war criminal. People are saying he should face that charge because he took a country to war under a false pretense. And if Chilcot finds that he took a country to war having first promised the American president he would stand with him come what may, then there's every reason to believe he
That's not a
deliberately...
war crime.
Well, it is if it's manipulation and manufacturing of the evidence and deception of Parliament in order to get the support for the vote, and the consequences therefore fall on your head. That is what would classically be called a war of aggression as opposed to a war of self-defence. The war of self-defence and the legality of this war was, remembered, based on the argument that Saddam Hussein had a collection of weapons of mass destruction which were within 45 minutes of hitting the United Kingdom, or at least United Kingdom territories. Now, that clearly wasn't true. Now, Tony Blair say, oh, well, I honestly believe that. Well, we'll see what Chilcot does to back up his claim.
In your gut, do you think that Chilcot is going to be quite as critical as some of the newspapers seem to be saying after they say they've had leaks? And do you smell a whitewash?
I don't, actually. In Blair's behaviour, I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised. I'm hoping
you think he wouldn't be doing this if it was a whitewash?
If Blair was, in my estimation, and of my generation, God help me, of Blair watching, my estimation is that if he was quietly content by the contents of the Chilcot report, he'd be keeping quiet.
Right, Barbara, thank you. Let's go to Rowan, who's in Suffolk. Hello, Rowan.
Hi, Ian.
Hello.
I've got a question for why is it that the left, the traditional defenders, or so-called defenders of workers' rights and workers' wages, have sold out the British people by advocating uncontrolled, unlimited migration, which has suppressed the wages of working conditions of British workers across the UK?
Well, the counter-argument, Rowan, would be that within the social chapter and the other social mechanisms of the European Union, there's a range of protections for workers which may or may not have been in place without our membership of the European Union. And certainly, on the record, people like Boris Johnson, when asked about the social chapter, he said his view was to scrap it. Now, let's remember what these rights are. These are rights that part-time workers have, rights like full-time workers. This is rights of protection of number of hours at work, the Working Time Directive. It's the equality of pay for women.
But most of these issues were introduced by a UK government, not under EU legislation.
The range of EU legislation has provided a framework for protection of rights of workers. Now, the Prime Minister today, for example, gave examples of where the UK legislation has gone beyond that. But looking at the mettle of the Brexiteers, I have to say I find it unconvincing to believe that any of them are enthusiasts for the social chapter. And of course, some of them have said quite explicitly that their economic ambition, that their claim for an economic revival is in dismantling many of these protections which they see as an impediment to the marketplace.
Now, just to finish off, you've fought probably more elections than you care to remember. You can sniff the electorate, if that's not an unfortunate phrase. What's your gut feeling? What's going to happen on the 23rd of June?
Well, as you know, Ian, and we've discussed this a number of times, both privately and on air, I've been saying for some months that I thought this referendum was too close to call, and I thought that the Remain campaign, in my estimation, were fighting on the wrong ground, not because they're fighting on the economy as opposed to immigration. It's the nature of the campaign, the lack of a positive case for Europe.
And we still haven't heard that, really.
No, apart from our occasional interview, and I think there is a great positive case to be made for Europe, and others have tried to make that case as well. But there's 2 weeks to go, and I think it's still up in the air. I hope and believe Scotland will vote Remain. I think I'm speaking in all corners of this kingdom over the next 2 weeks, so that'll make a dramatic difference.
I know. I got the press release.
That's right. So I'm going out. I'm going from Oxford to Londonderry over the next few days, and
stirring up apathy, as Willie Whiteley used to say.
I think one thing we can conclude from the broken website last night is that apathy is not going to be the key problem of this referendum. I think people are stirring out of their apathy. I believe that they're stirring in the right direction.
Alex, we will see you again next week. Thank you very much
pleasure.
Indeed. Now we will continue our discussion about voter registration, whether the deadline should have been extended. Do you think it's only fair if people want to register to vote, they should be allowed to? Or do you think it is an example of blatant gerrymandering? 0345 6060 973. I have to say, I can make the argument for both sides on that one, which is highly unusual for me. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC. I'm Ian Dale. It's 4:32. News headlines, Ros Unwin.
The deadline for registering to vote in the EU referendum has been extended after the website crashed last night when more than 200,000 people an hour were trying to register.